Welcome to this session on the Coding Bootcamp on NexusDB. It's a database engine that was written in Delphi for Delphi programmers and also C++ programmer builders. Okay, just a quick little note. NexusDB's won a couple of awards back in the early days, entirely written by hand. We didn't use any bots or anything for it. It's 100% native Pascal. There's been a bit of tweaking done, a bit of assembler down to lower levels on some of it to get it nice and fast. However, essentially it's a 100% native Pascal script. So why NexusDB in brief? Well, quite simply, it'll compile, the engine can compile fully into your executable if you decide to embed the actual DBMS inside of the code, which means there's no annoying DLL substitute, no additional exes. Everything is just compiled into your exe. And by everything, we're talking about every single feature of this industrial strength DBMS. If you like, you can then compile it without the SQL access, if you like. If you remove the SQL access, then you have a NoSQL exe with everything built in, which is screamingly fast. So the big deal here, as you know, as you've probably gathered already, looking at either our title and what we've already said, is that we're 20 years old, young, whatever you want to call it today. I like to think of it as 20 years mature today, okay, as in this year. Indeed, with these a couple of things on here, I just want to really point out to you that our engine is incredibly stable, incredibly fully featured, and it's written in Delphi. What more could you ask for? It can be compiled into a NoSQL application in less than 10 megabytes, unless you've got some really fancy front end there. Okay, let's get into it. The brief history of the development, and I'll just go over this so that we understand, was that the main goals back when we started this was that we needed a drop-in replacement because Turbo Power Software Company had removed Flash Filer from the market, and we needed an engine as a replacement for the BDE, and we just made the decision then that we would actually go ahead and write it. It took 6 months. We had quite a few design goals in our head when we were working with it. In the notes section, which I'm not going to bother talking through for you, can look at them at a later date. We did the whole thing in 6 months flat. It was an interesting time. There were 5 of us working on it, from anything from on average from about 12 to 16 or 18 hour days, but we got the whole thing out in the time. And since then, we're now up to version 4.7, if memory serves me right. Okay, to get going, now let's get stuck into it. So you're into programming and you've got a commercial job, and the boss and everything, virtually all big commercial jobs will involve data being stored somewhere. Hence the need for a database management system, a DBMS. Now, just so that some of the lingo, for those of you that perhaps are a little bit newer to the area, when we talk about a file shared system like there on the right, then that's what the BDE is. Okay, so the BDE gives you file access, so you can actually create your exe with a database, say paradox tables, whatever it is you want to put in there, and then when your client grows and says, oh, I like this application, let's deploy it to the whole of the business. Okay, well, here's a shared folder. So you put it into a shared folder that everyone has access to, and 5 minutes later, there's chaos. And that's because of, down there on the bottom of the right-hand side there, no control over access. Each client is independent of the other client exes. So although the data is there and they can all access it, it's pretty much, if they're doing read-only access, well, even that has some issues in terms of an upper ceiling, and when there's no control, because each one creates buffers on the server, buffers fill, they get trashed, and all of a sudden they get called again. So there's a lot of thrashing, etc. And over the decades, the the computing industry, if you like, has pretty much moved to, in terms of a realistic industrial model, what's called the client-server database management system. And what this does is this splits up all database applications into a set of clients, and think of the clients as the end users, if you like, the people that are going to make use of your exe, use your GUI, record data, store it, edit it, delete it, whatever, draw reports, etc. And then you have a centralized database for all the client exes to access. They may be within the company, there may be one dial in from outside, one may come in directly over the internet. It doesn't matter which. NX Server will allow that thing. So NX Server controls, and as you see there in the simple flow diagram there, it looks at all of the requests from the clients, and then it makes the decision on what data to retrieve, buffering of this data, determining whether, if a lot of clients are accessing the same data, which might be, for instance, header data, then it will keep that in RAM. Alternatively, you can, in terms of NX Server, actually set it up so that it actually does store, and you can literally have an in-memory database. So if it's a database that might be full of information that's just like note-taking, whatever, and you don't want to be slowed down by access to the drive. And I remember before we had the fast SSDs, there was the HDDs, and there could sometimes be a factor of up to 1,000 between memory access and accessing something on disk. So you had to be careful, and hence having an in-memory database was useful. Okay, so that's that. So let's just stop and put this on pause for half a second. Let's think about this conceptually. The Nexus, or any database server, can sit on, as is shown here on the left-hand side, can sit on a server, and the corporation can look after that and maintain that. Client applications can send data to the server. The server feeds this data presumably to a database. But the code is agnostic to the style of the data. It can be anything. It can be files. It can be data, raw data in terms of transactional data. Or it could be video and or textual messages. So just as a little aside here, we can make use of the modular approach to Nexus to actually build ourselves a Telegram, Teams, Skype-like application ourselves. And in fact, it actually happens to be one of our examples. We lay down, if you like, the underlying structure that's needed should you want to actually build your own internal. And there are many reasons for it. For instance, each one of the arrows in both sides of the diagram here represents a flow of data. It doesn't have to just be one way. It's not just one way. A data is a communication pipe, a transport, if you like, is the terminology we use. It's a transport. So it transports data to and from the server. Now, if we don't actually care, suppose we have an application where a corporation has asked us, we want an internal, guaranteed, nothing to do with the internet, so no worries about spying, etc., application, so that our workers can chat to each other in a Teams or Skype-like manner, without any concerns. We'd also like for it to be secure. Now, you would just simply respond to that with no problems. I'm using NexusDB. They've got transports with all forms of encryption over the transport. So you can send encrypted data if you wish. But for the basic app that I'm going to demonstrate here today in the next couple of slides, just concentrate on the diagram on the right-hand side there. And what we're going to do is we'll lay down the basic infrastructure that's required from Nexus. After that, it's up to you. You want to put encryption over it? Literally, it's change a component. Literally. Actually, it can be as simple as changing the property of a component. But anyway, and I'm going to make the simple assumption here that you're not actually storing the messages. All this is meant to be is a little chat bot which sits up in somebody's corner, and somebody else might contact you and say, hey, Fred, Bill, Jane, whomever, tea in 5 minutes, whatever, and you can respond to them as in one-to-one, or you might like to broadcast. Hey folks, don't forget, we're having an early lunchtime seminar today. Get your asses down to the conference room. Starts in 15 minutes. So, as you can see, the rationale for actually creating as well. Just FYI, back in the 90s, I've had to write this at the socket level, and it's an interesting thing to do. It is so much easier with Nexus. Okay, let's move, and as I said, I'll just first introduce in the next slide the actual the demo where you'll find it in our demo apps. And then we'll actually I won't bother too much with explaining the code in the background. Rather, let's just have a play with it and see at this maturity and stability and the sheer breadth of what comes with Nexus.
Hello folks, it's me again. Don't worry about the me again bit. That's simply because this is like the 18th time I've tried to record this particular slide. It had better work this time. Okay, so I'm now going to give you a demo of NX Server without a database connected to the background. What we're just doing is demonstrating the ability for you to write a client app, and this one here is the one that you should start with. This is the one I was saying before, that the superstructure for it that sets it all in place for you, and it allows messages to be transported from the client to the server, and from the server either to other clients or all other clients, a specific client, whatever. In that vein, so in doing that, you'll notice here, if you've actually got the remoting client-to-client messaging system up, that my version of it here is marginally different. Please note, I actually haven't changed any code here. All I've actually done is rearranged the buttons, the visual interface, if you like, which you can obviously do yourself as well, for it to be a little bit more concise and make sense. And I've also added a component, again, no code. All I did was I connected it up to this get clients click event handler, which is connected to the get client list, get client click. And all this does is on the timer, which I've just left for the default 1 second, every second, every client will communicate with the server and say, refresh my list of who's connected and who's not connected. Well, not so much who's not connected, just who is connected, right? And then that sits in this list box back here, combo box I should say, so that you can just select to send a message to one person only. The promiscuous button, though, receives all messages. Now we'll demonstrate that in a second. So all of this is pretty straightforward. The main thing here is that these three components here in this chain, you're going to see a lot of them in the other three demonstrations that I'm going to give later in this session. And the secured handler, this is the command handler, this is actually sort of like the central thing for the messages going backwards and forth. And the blowfish encryption, a secured transport, is an overlay on top of the WinSock transport. This is TCP/IP WinSock transport. And what this does is it uses obviously encryption. Blah, blah, blah. Like I said, 18 times, we're going to power through to the end because I'm not going to do it again if I can hold it. Okay. And when we connect, one of the beauties that we're going to show here is that if you connect via this button, then WinSock Transport is set to port 16,000, whereas if we connect via the Connect Secure button, we actually use a different transport, and we set the transport to the Blowfish Secured Transport. Okay, so that's the difference between these two things here. Okay. And that's pretty much in the background. So before I do the demo, I'll just finish talking about the code here first. In the background, that's the most important part. Let me just bring, with Delphi, let me just bring this down a bit. Those two buttons, that's got pretty much the most code around it. The whole thing for this, right, is a mere 230 lines long, and most of them are just small at setting things up, handling messages that get received, etc. in the background, sort of stuff that you could actually build into a component yourself if you wanted to. But it's these two here that set the scene and get everything going. Everything else is really, really quite trivial. Okay, for instance, there's the broadcast button. When you want to broadcast to everybody, that's all. That's the single line of code you need in Nexus for that. Okay, I've already compiled these, so let me just downsize the Delphi IDE. All right. Actually, what I'll do is I'll start this from scratch. Anyhow, so clean slate here, and what I'm going to do is, this is my icon for the NX server that I've got, the 64-bit version. I'll just double click it, up it comes, and move to the transports. I'll go to the TCP/IP transport, and you'll notice here, as I was saying before, I've got it set for port 16,000. I can't change that, obviously, because that's active. You need to inactivate it to set to 17,000, or, and here's a trick, you could actually have two NX servers running here on different ports, provided you've assigned them to different subdirectories, right? You'd actually have them running on different ports, and everything is A-OK, it doesn't matter. Okay, so that's a good way to separate the two communication systems, if you like, between the people that are just doing ordinary old chit-chatting that you don't care about, or versus maybe it's encrypted with the encrypted messages. Maybe you want to save them, whatever, for whatever. You want to make sure the encrypted messages get through, so it's a lighter transport system. So now this is all up. So now all you need now down here is the client-to-client messaging, the icon, which points directly to it, as you can see into the examples folder there. Now, if we double-click that, then up pops a client. Now, because I'm running on my own machine, okay, you will have noticed in the Delphi, let me just bring the code up again, that in here, the actual remote server engine is set up. Remote server engine at runtime is 127.0.101. So that's the loopback adapter, loopback. Notice that we allow you to actually use a design time, a different design time from runtime, which is really good. It means that you can configure it for your remote site, for your client site, but when you're testing it at home on your system, you might have a different server, which is what you put in your design time. But this is just going to run on the same machine, so I just put it into the server name runtime. Okay, so getting back to this particular example. So we've just booted up, and so this is going to be, person one. Let's make them a promiscuous client for the moment, and let's connect. And when we do that, if we look in the list, there's nobody in there. We can push this ourselves manually if we want to, but it's on that timer for one. Oh, I hope I set the timer to go. Maybe I didn't, in which case we can easily just redo that. So come back in. Let's now put a few more clients around. Now remember, this is just the one exe, the client exe. This is your exe. So this is what you use. This here, the NX server, is what it's like the supervisor. It's the server. It's the server in the client server communication system. And these are the clients. And this is I don't know. This is Jill. She's not promiscuous. She clinics. And another client. Let's put another person in. Let's make it Fred. He is promiscuous. Let's make him connect too. So now, when we look down, indeed the timer is indeed working. I didn't even check to see that. And so, as soon as Fred connects, he sees that person one and Jill are available. And ditto, without having to refresh the client list, person one can see Jill and Fred, and Jill can see person one and Fred. Okay, so let's send a message from person one to, let's broadcast to all first, right? So we'll just go, hi everyone, lunchtime seminar starts soon. Broadcast to all. And as you saw, it comes down here to this person, comes down here to this person here. Okay, let's suppose instead that client one wants to talk to Jill, but not Fred. So what they puts in here is, hey Jill, Fred won't be around much. And then we select Jill from here. Oops, that's because of my silly Timer. Oh, that's a silly thing. Send to this person only. And notice here this. Hey, Fred won't be around much. Hey, Jill, Fred won't be around much because Fred is promiscuous. So a promiscuous client receives all messages. Okay? So that's that. Whereas he could have gone, hey, Fred, that's just for the heck of it, right? And let's choose Fred, send to this person only. Dearie me, that's because it was, it cleared it with the, so if I just go Fred, send, I can't get the timing right, folks. It's only got 1 second of opportunity there, and then I'm lost. Well, that's my fault for mucking around at the last minute with code that works. I mean, it's the old saying, if it works, don't fix it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, I should say. So now I hope you get a good feel for this particular system, and you can connect this up. The beauty about it all is, as I was showing a couple of slides ago, is that this is literally, going back to that slide, right, this is literally the infrastructure for the data messaging of a DBMS system. It doesn't have to just be ours, it can be anybody's, Oracle, whatever, right? So in any database management system, in principle, if you don't have a database connected up, and you've told the clients, and you have a plugin in the client already, as we do, which will handle client-to-client messaging, well, it's data, it's binary, and it's going over TCP/IP. We have a socket, we have a socket connection, that is, we have an IP address and a port. I presume everybody knows that, obviously, right? Socket connection means IP. An IP address plus a port number, as in here. Those two together represent a socket. So, so by connecting to here, and the beauty, as I was saying here, is this. This is a good subsystem to use because we've actually just absolutely screwed down and made Nexus so efficient in the messaging and the transport. So, for instance, we've even now, obviously, if we're only going to send text messages between people, well, as you know, 7-zip will zip text down to, gosh, on a good day, it'll zip it down to about 25%, maybe, of the original text. Sometimes even quite lower, depending on what text is being sent. So on our transport, we've got the ability for you to add encryption. So if you're not sending pure binary, in which case it's pretty pointless trying to encrypt something that's in proper binary. You can also do binary in a crazy way, like, for instance, ASCII is just a crazy binary system. But anyway, that's because of its heritage and computers way back there in the 1950s and 60s. So I shouldn't really pick on ASCII for that. It's just amazing we still use it today. The thing about this is that this is, if you're using text, then you can do that. You can put compression on it, and you're going to get really, really lean, mean, and efficient communication. And as I've been, harping along in the earlier thing, earlier on, is that Nexus, it's so mature. Nexus, especially the transporting system, the transport layer. It's because that's the backbone of it. That's you've got to get data from point A to point B. Right? And we've got to do it in an efficient manner, and we've got to do it as speedily as possible. Efficient in the sense of using the least amount of processing power and and as fast as possible, meaning, make sure we minimize the number of messages between, in the background between actual data going up and down. Okay, well, that's about all I want to do for this one here, although what I will do is we will just, for the moment, go back in. I will get rid of that timer component, and when you get yours, this is now what yours is roughly going to look like, except that you're going to have these are going to be moved over to here, this will be done underneath, whatever. I will just Shift F9 that, so I built that, okay. And now, when I run it, and this is what you will get, you will see when you run it. So that's client A, promiscuous, connect, go up, client B, promiscuous, connect, click this, client C, not promiscuous, connect. And now when we come down, there's nobody in the client description list, so we need to do a get client list. And now we see A and B, and ditto up here, don't see anybody, so get a client list, and sorry, get client list. There we go, that's better. And down here, we'll do the same thing. We'll get the client list, and there they are. So we can send to a message to A, but you've got to click this send to person A only, and say, hi A. So if you go send to this person only, and it appears up here and not in this person, purely because they're not promiscuous. If they've been promiscuous, then it would have got to them as well. Now, you can change that in the background yourself as well, obviously, if you want to. And if we want to broadcast to all, we click here, and even though they're not promiscuous, they still get the message. Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed that little demo. Again, the purpose of this is to stress how stable and efficient the transport layer is in Nexus. You can even use it for this thing without even having a database connected in the background. Okay, thank you for your time. I'll just kill it. If I have to do a 19th recording, I'm going to be very up.
So that concludes our little quick warm-up demo of the power of NexusDB, as you can see. It's very easy to modify it from storing data in a database to actually talking between various clients. This particular slide is a little set of notes for you that were repeated obviously inside of the demo, but which you can use at a later stage just to remind yourself of how things work. Remember, in the background, this can do a lot more than what we just did in that demo, especially the RPC interfaces, the remote procedure call interfaces, which allow you to send and receive results from methods that are actually executing on other clients. So it makes it a very, very powerful thing. We built the thing specifically for notifications when somebody does something and you need to make a notification to appear somewhere else, e.g. you're making a specific call, as I mentioned ages ago when it was the beginning of the talk. You're making calls to different parts of an organization, say different departments, and for instance, when data goes somewhere, e.g. here's an invoice, it's been paid for, the customer's weighing up, you can make it so it automatically sends a message down to the dispatch department where it comes up and they go, oh, no, someone's coming down in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, to pick up these couple of goods. Okay, now let's get back to the main demo for that. Now, I'll leave this for you to study at a later date, but the most important thing to notice here is that this is, in terms of theory, this is pretty much how things go when you are when you're designing a DBMS. Now, you might say, well, I'm only going to use it, I'm not going to design it. Yes, but you only use your car, it's still useful to know that it's got an internal combustion engine underneath the bonnet. It's useful to know when things are going right, if they're designed right, etc. and noise. And ditto with this. If you understand what's happening in the background, then as you mature and become a more experienced database programmer, you'll actually say, oh, well, hold on, I know that in my database engine, and this is, as I said, it's pretty much vendor agnostic, these diagrams here. This is pretty much like a high-level view of what you would have, and you can actually make use of the components in the design of your programs and your data itself. It's very useful to know what's happening. So I'll leave that for you to look at your own stage, because we want to get into the interesting stuff, the coding. Okay, again, just a quick slide for the rationale for why you should, why you can trust that. And I'm happy for you not to have studied the previous slide and not to be totally understand the entire workings of the internal combustion engine. Quite happy for you just to have a low level, because you need to accept that if you buy for instance, a Toyota, then you know that you've got that reliability from the many years that they've done there. You buy NexusDB, you've got that strength and also the maturity. It's a very, very mature engine. And so the first working demonstrations I'm going to give you here are about embedded servers. Now, embedded servers, in terms of that in-depth diagram before, I gave you does this. So notice your application there on the left-hand side in the orange, and on the right-hand side the physical data store. So you've got your data stored on disk. Your application wants to access it. So your application compiles into one layer the client components there. That's in box number 1. Okay, and for that, all you need to know is, so long as I've got a TNX session, TNX database, etc., and so forth, then you'll be able to access it. However, because of the a modular design of the engine itself, as you see there in box 2, we actually merge these two together these two actually merge together inside of your executable, so that the engine itself is actually encoded, is actually coded and compiled directly into your exe. And as you can see there, it's a little bit easier. So what happens is when you make a call, e.g. open a table, then that inside of your exe, literally is a call that goes to the internal server, the embedded server engine, and says, open this. And it then goes and says, oh yeah, I found it, it's there, it's open, and says, yep, I've opened it. And by the way, here's a handle to that table in case you want to read records, write records, whatever you want to do. And down the bottom of the diagram, as you see, is if you're an experienced programmer, or as you get along, your client asks for certain specific nuances that are added, well, you can always plug them into the server engine, even though it's an embedded server. So the two simple cases we're going to do here is very simple, and again, this is just at the very high level, is we're going to look at the data access components that are needed, and then we're going to compile into that a server engine, and then in the second example, a server engine that's actually a SQL, so an RDBMS, a relational database management system, as opposed to a NoSQL server, which would be without the SQL engine. Okay, I've included this here for you for later. It's just a short card on this demo, including where you will find it in our list of. So this is our first code-free example demo. Now, just please note there'll be a little bit of out of sync between what we're showing here and what my words are. Just a bit of a problem with the technical of this end, trying to get to learn it. But anyway, the starter project is a code-free example of how to create an embedded Nexus client application. The main components, you can see, they're taken from the Nexus tab of the palette in Delphi. Once you've dropped all 5 components on the form, which is already done for you here, you only need to connect them up in a chain as shown. Now, for each component, you only need to select the component in the chain above it, and that is it. Match up the properties to link those components together, and then everything is done. Note that I've actually, the one thing you have to do is in the Nexus table component, you have to actually put the name of the table. Now, you can either click down and navigate through in the IDE, or I already have copied a table across I want to show and do the demo with. And so that's already there. And as you saw before in the code window, there's no code there. It's been put there by Delphi itself. And when it's run, bingo, all the data from my instruments table is displayed there in the DB grid in the background. And there's nothing you had to write. It's just the components go down, connect them up, make sure you've got a data label connected, and then that is it. It's all done. So after that change of pace in terms of I did the screen grab, somebody else did the words, as you may or may not have noticed, the next one that I want to do, that I want to show you a bit of coding example, again involves, surprise, surprise, no coding. Rather, it's let's go on to that second version of the two simplest ones, which is an embedded SQL engine as opposed to an embedded NoSQL, or if you like, direct record by record engine, the core engine itself. Now, a couple of things to mention, which again I'll point out on the screen as we did the screen grab, right, is that it has one extra component. The very first one in the sequence, in the chain, is actually a TNX SQL engine. That's one of the sub engines that you plug in that we're talking about in terms of this modularity and extensibility at the very heart and core of Nexus. Well, given it's just a straightforward one, again, no coding required, let's get stuck into it.
Second demo project, which is an embedded SQL application, is the same code for the example of how to create an embedded Nexus client app. The difference is that whilst the first one used the record-based engine, this one will use the SQL sub-engine to access the same table via SQL, obviously. The main components are pretty much the same, except that you now need an SQL sub-engine at the top of the component hierarchy. That's just at the very, very top, as I was saying there. Make sure that that's all chained and linked up, which obviously is here for you in the example. And also that the TNX table components have been replaced by TNX query component. You need to go into that component, into the SQL string list, and put in the table name. In my case, it's instruments. Okay, once that's done, you can press run. Well, actually, it's already there, so just press run, watch the thing go. And again, it does the same thing. It will connect up to the table, provided you've supplied a valid table, and display all of the records in the DB grid that's there. Again, have a bit of a play around, experiment, and see if you can make it a little bit more useful, meaning write some real code there in the background. Okay, catch you soon. So the final demo in this demo project in this session that I'm going to take you through now involves a bit of coding. So there's a bit of coding involved, as I'll stress when we come to the actual example itself. However, the purpose of it is that it's to demonstrate some of that, everything that we can do manually can also be done in code. First, I recommend that you just simply compile the code and then execute it. And this is how it works when it's run. Just click, as per the instructions on the front screen, click the Create Buttons table to create the table with the full text index. Once that's done, and then in the background, the demo will actually load the Pascal unit into the table, one line per record, okay? Then enter a word to look up in the input field in the middle of the screen there and click the Set Range button. The upper grid will display the whole table and the lower grid displays the filtered result after applying the range. Now, this is a range, not strictly a filter. And then try entering something like begin or end or Dursley or whatever in the input field. And only those rows that contain those words will be displayed. And this perhaps will help you to come to grips with full text indexing if you're not already familiar with the concept itself. The text field and the grids can be edited to test finding records with words entered. The full text indexes load both text and MIMO fields. If it's actually a MIMO field though, and you're doing manually, then click the Load MIMO button to load a much larger text file into the MIMO to just see how fast and effective our full text engine is. Okay, let's get started on the example. It's a bit of a hairy one. Third demo project, the full text indexing example, actually does require you to do some coding, and hence the introduction. There are other examples involving just the enterprise tool manager, blah, 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 etc. But for the moment, this particular one, which we are focusing on, is interesting. I suggest that you simply run it first, as it will, and then go through the introduction I gave in the previous slide into just experimenting with it, playing it, get a decent feel for it. Let's have a look at as we look at some of the more interesting aspects of it. And also, unlike in the earlier examples, this project has a lot of code oriented for you. You should study that sample code because a lot of the complexities in full text indexing are when you start to go deeper and do more things in terms of the actual words, the searching, the flagging of them, etc. And the code there that you see commented out in the background is actually an example if you want to make use of these extra features, of the deeper features. Once you get a hang of the first word, full text indexing, then that will allow you to do that. For instance, putting in a form of soundex, for instance, you can do this and add that as well. But anyway, so the code is all there, including stuff there. So stuff commented out is not bad. It's just that stuff that leave for a rainy day when you want to learn a bit, or when you want to learn a bit more about it.
When you're strange, faces come out of the rain. When you're strange, no one remembers your name. when you're strange, when you're strange, when you're strange.
Well, thank you for that annotation. Sorry, I should say annotated description, or whilst I did the screen hopping around there, young lad. And now I am going to talk about a couple of the support tools that we have. So of the examples we all gave you were actually of embedded server only. If you were developing a real database system for multiple users, you would obviously be employing the client server model. And for that instance, in that instance, all you do is replace. Remember, in the component chain, you merely replace the the server engine with a remote server engine component, and you connect that in your client application to this. This is NX server, a la the diagram about slide 4 or 5 or so. This is the one that you deploy to their database server. You make sure that all the tables are on there, and then you turn it on. As you can see there at the top, the transports, you can use TCP/IP, name piped if it's a Windows network. HTTP transports are supported as well, so you can come in directly. This is all built into this, and if you have a subscription to Nexus, well, then we allow you to distribute this royalty free at this point in time. And to go through an example connect up is probably going to is worthy of another half hour or so example, and time forbids that here. Okay, but that's the first of the two most important tools, and the next one is. And our final support tool that I need to bring to your attention, it's not just NX Server and NX Enterprise Manager. We've got a few others. We've got data pumps, etc. There's obviously ODBC drivers, PHP drivers, etc. You can go to our website if you want to see the full list of them. But of course, one of the things most people are going to be interested in is an Enterprise Manager. So this is, we call it just NX, obviously, NX Enterprise Manager, to convey that it does. It's your DBA tool. This is what you would distribute. You don't have to code this up. This comes with your subscription for Nexus, and if you've got a subscription, then you have a license to distribute this as you see fit. The thing about this is, anyone that's used a DBA tool before, it's got everything here. You can create tables, delete tables, restructure, everything's there for you. So I won't do that one to death because we're probably running out of time. Okay. Well, if you've made it this far through the presentation, congratulations. I'm glad that you stuck with it this far, and I hope you see it through to the end. The technical side of it, in terms of the coding and that, which as practice, as I'll drill that into you again in the next couple of slides as well. You know, it's one of those things where experience, go out and do it. It's what you hear. You know, it's like driving a car. It's very easy to describe how to do it. Push that pedal, but until you go out and you bang into a couple of other cars and run over the odd pedestrian and dog, until you do those type of things, you just don't appreciate how to drive. It's all about the experience. In terms of the various features that we have, we've got a full set on the website. I've just put this down here for you to read while I ramble on. And, you know, I can't say it often enough. I've said it in about 8 previous slides, but yeah, we're industrial strength, genuine, hardy DBMS, both SQL and non-SQL. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so we're now at this point where we're pretty much finished. I've shown you only a very brief intro to Nexus, obviously, and database programming in general. I mean, this is something where, you know, you are considered an experienced programmer working in the DBMS sphere once you've got about 3 to 5 years of work experience under your belt. You know, it's complex. there's a lot to it. There's a lot we've obviously haven't even looked at. It's the reason that any database engine costs a little bit more. They do cost a pretty penny. Not ours, ours royalty-free distribution at the moment. Jump in while you can. And that's a good point that you should make, because remember, it's not a case of you saying, hey, I'm going to choose this DBMS or that DBMS. When you get out into the workforce, you'll be told to make a case for one, or told go and use Oracle. And then that's when you come back and download some of the notes from our website, if you like, or if you look at the notes to this particular slide. And we give you an example of how you could make a case for Nexus. And the reality is, it is not just a incredibly stable DBMS. It's also very cheap as well. So in terms of use, I mean, we don't have the ridiculous multi-thousands of dollars per year to licensing fees that Oracle and Microsoft have, for instance. And I've been assured by a number of our Delphi database programmers, we actually outperform those two right this year. Someone in England did an incredibly detailed study over many months and was just flabbergasted at the technical superiority of Nexus to well, I won't say the name, but it might rhyme with horrible DB. Anyway, we'll leave that. I'll leave it up to the auditors to decide whether or not to go with that one. Okay. And now, this is the penultimate slide. It's the only ultimate to come. So thank you for staying with us to the end of this little session. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, although I assure you it took a little bit more than 45 minutes to put this all together, as every one of the other presenters will also assure you. Well, as promised, if you are interested, you can go and download a trial version from our website, or if you've totally made your mind up and decided, yep, this is it, NexusDB for me, I've got to get the best. Well, in that case, take advantage of the 50% discount. Given we're celebrating our 20-year anniversary. Join it with us. See you some other time. Bye.
Geoff, you are. I speak to these guys on Telegram, and Geoff is just like that on Telegram, exactly the same. Bouncy. I mean, I know I get told I'm bouncy as well, but Geoff is unique. Geoff is actually asleep / in prison / something else. He's currently, I believe, on holiday in Japan. But instead, now, I'm really sorry. I'm going to pronounce your name wrong. Many Americans get my name wrong as well and say Ian instead of Ian. So I'm going to say that your name is pronounced Eivind Bakkustuen.
Close enough.
Close enough. Well, you're very kind. Anyway, he's joining us live. How do you say your name?
Eivind Bakkustuen, I would say. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I wasn't that far off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Geoff had an interesting presentation. We will go back and re-edit it and remove the music that I told him not to put on, because otherwise we get a copyright strike on YouTube, because you can't just use it When You're Strange without actually paying thousands of dollars to some royalty group or something like that. It's all good. But anyway, yeah, it's all good. So I'm remembering to point this direction now. So if they scan this QR code, it will actually take them to your NexusDB website, and people will be able to download a copy. Is that right? You've got trial versions, I believe. Is that right or not?
Yeah, we have trial versions for every Delphi version we support. You'll also find our free embedded version or links to it on the Get It inside the IDE, if you want to try it directly from the IDE.
Yeah, I think the embedded version is very interesting as well, because I think what's really interesting about NexusDB is the way, I mean, I know there are some other database technologies that do a similar thing, that they split up into modularity for functionality. But yours does something quite interesting, which I don't think anybody else does. I could be wrong, which is you take the SQL engine and make that modular as well. So you've got the database, and then you've got the actual SQL engine as a component that you can pick or choose whether you use it, which is what was the thinking behind that? Do you know? Or
well, it's to make the entire database engine, core and client access and everything modular, so you can put together exactly the solution you want.
Right.
If you want table-based access only, then you don't need to include the SQL engine.
That's interesting. Yeah,
I mean, small for it.
Yeah, I'm fascinated. I thought it was a very novel thing, and I thought one of the final things that Geoff said at the end was about that someone in the UK had done a comparison, and I can say Oracle against Oracle, and found that actually there was a significant sort of advantage to using NexusDB, and that was and I've seen that example as well, where there are some figures, facts and figures as well, if it's the one I'm thinking of, where they actually backed up their assertions with some real genuine data as well. So very interesting. Yeah. We did get some questions as we were going along. Let me just so one person was saying they couldn't quite understand what the costs were for use by me and my customers. Could you explain the costs and the licensing? I think Geoff did mention that it's royalty free. Is that right, or have I misunderstood?
That's right. Yes, you pay per developer to get NexusDB, and there's no royalty for distributing your server or anything like that. So.
Yeah, so it's pay once and then off you go. Yeah, and is it a subscription model, or is it a one-off price?
Yes, it'll be a yearly subscription.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, I think that it's an open sort of understanding of what's going on, and that's the most important thing. Is that if they know they're going to pay X amount per year, people can gauge, the cost of the system to them. I always find these ones where I know SQL Server does this. On MySQL, if you actually go and get the commercial version of MySQL, they price per, I think it's CPU and connection, CAL or something like that, client access license. And I remember having to price some system before, and nobody could give me a straight answer to what I was going to pay. I actually had a licensing specialist from Microsoft, and I'm sure there are hundreds of them, and some are better than others. But this one was their job, was to give me a price for what I was asking for. I had a server, I had a use case that had been worked out. We planned out how many clients there would be, and this was actually for a government system, actually, funny enough, years ago. Nobody could give me a price, and it was ridiculous. In the end, actually, they lost the deal. They went elsewhere because it was just so convoluted that you had to, how many people would connect at the same time? Which servers would you have it on? How many CPUs are you going to have? What maximum throughput would you have on the query? Like, how do I know? It's absolutely incredible. It's I don't understand how people can price like that, and I do. I know there are plenty that do it that way, but if yours is a relatively straightforward subscription, then that's fine. So that was Barton anyway. And actually, Barton also follows up and says, even MSQL cannot answer how to price Microsoft SQL for a client. Well, I can't say that. I can just only talk about my experience when I was working somewhere else, and I had the same problem. I have to call third parties for the info. Yeah, I think that's true. I think that your database is one that I particularly wanted you guys to come on, and actually you're doing a session tomorrow as well. Because I feel like we don't give it enough air sometimes. I think that it's a great system, and I think a lot of people that do use NexusDB think it's the best thing ever. So
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the best kind of compliment you can get is by a customer saying, yes, I'd like to use it, and it's great. I think it's good.
Yeah, we do have a fair number of customers who've been with us ever since we started out 20 years ago. So I guess that says something about longevity.
Yeah, longevity,
they're
and
happy
also
to use it.
Yeah, and the stability as well, because if your product was unstable, it wouldn't have been around for 20 years, because that's how these things go by the wayside. I think it's voting by usage. One person said, T. Arnold, who's been with us all the time, in the demo, he said 1 second update on the timer is a little bit too efficient. I thought that was quite interesting. And the other thing that I thought was quite funny is that Geoff kept saying, Jill is not promiscuous, Fred is promiscuous. So I had to write down, because I think he was talking about, obviously, the connection, and the promiscuous in computer science is how often it attempts to communicate with other services. But it was quite a funny thing to say in a demo. Okay, all right. Well, we haven't got any massively complicated questions. So what time is it there for you? It's
5:57. I quickly say there's one question here. There was this question about the data size limits.
Oh, yes, I can bring that up, actually. I saw that one. Where is it?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but I think we are talking about the petabyte range. So for practical purposes today, the limit is the size of your hard drive.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you might, what I think you're saying is there's a limit, but you'll be going some to get to that limit. I think that's
that's right.
Yeah. Does it do I should have read this before I asked this question, but does it do what's the word I'm looking for? Multiple servers that what do they call it? Like a backup server, where you have one server can get the data, and then another one can actually receive a copy. So there's a failover type thing. If something goes wrong, you've got.
Yes, we don't have that built in directly, but it's possible to implement. We are working on new features that will include things like that. So, always working on new things.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. And Ad Franco there, it says, I can confirm the stability of NexusDB for nearly 20 years now. So that's clearly a happy customer. I mean, you're a technology partner, and we do try and support our technology partners, and it is my job to actually interface with you guys and help surface your talents, shall we say. We've got this ability to run these webinars and things like that, and I think that every technology partner is definitely worth us trying to make sure that you get the exposure you do. A lot of people don't know this, but you guys have been communicating with me on Telegram as you worked out what your demos would be, because these demos were written specifically. The slides were written specifically for this demo. I've never dealt with anybody who is so engaged and so active as you three. I take my hats off to you. You guys are crazy as well. but really, honestly, I mean, Geoff is in Japan, and he said to me, "Oh, sorry, I couldn't get back to you. There was a typhoon, and now there's a tornado." I mean, if anybody,
we do enjoy what we are doing.
Yeah, well, me too. I mean, people say, "Oh, Ian, you're always working. You're always around." Well, I like what I do, so it's not like work. You know what they say? Find a job you love. You'll never work another day in your life, and it's completely true. I mean, it feels like work after 4 days of conference, but
Well, it would.
It's. I mean, there's some questions about. Yeah, I mean, there's some questions comparing it to other databases. I think the best thing that they can do is go in and try it out for themselves and see what they have to say. Advantage DB, they're saying how fast it is or isn't. I know quite a lot about Advantage DB. It's a relatively good system. Try it. Download a copy and see what you think. The way to judge these things is better to try it out for yourself. As Ivan said, if they've been around for 20 years. If they were no good, they wouldn't be here anymore. There's plenty of people fall by the wayside because there's only so far you can get talking up a product until eventually it all collapses into pieces, and there's a few people with cryptocurrency, exchange legal cases right now who've discovered you can keep telling, untruths for a while until eventually it comes and bites you on the neck. So, yeah. What do third-party performance analyses say about NexusDB versus main SQL database? I think they mean MySQL database. I don't know. Again, I think this is something that they probably need to go and try for themselves. It's not difficult. If it's SQL, then you can generate two systems and see what the performance is in your particular use case. The thing about SQL is you can get a very good system and then a bad DBMS that writes bad queries, and you can slow it down and make it horrible. And there's only so much vendors like yourselves can do to prevent that. So if you write something bad and then take it from one system to another, it's going to be bad. So what can you do? Okay. And Tiana said, great session with a lot of info. So well done. Appreciate you getting up so early and sticking around through it. I imagine you've got caffeine that's waiting to come and prop you up a little bit. It would be for me.
Going to need some now, yes. Thank you
Yeah.
guys so much for having us.
Well, it's great. And like I say, there's another session tomorrow. Project Phoenix, turbocharging P4D for business applications. I think this is something that Geoff decided to do all of a sudden. So he's going to be doing some of our Python stuff. But I did say to Geoff before as well, and I think Thorsten, that I'd like to do another session on Nexus and show some more capabilities in action, actually demonstrate that. So hold me to that, and we'll communicate, I think, over Telegram or whatever, and we'll do it again and do something else, I think.
Certainly,
Yeah.
we're happy to show off some more of the advanced stuff we can do. So
yeah, I mean, this is what RAD Studio is good for, is doing this kind of database thing. And we're not trying to narrow people down into one solution. I think it's horses for courses, and whatever solution works for them. And we're not trying to say, Embarcadero, not trying to say this is better than this is better than this. My job is to make every tech partner and technology partner see the light of day. And if you're a good product, you'll naturally thrive. And we just need people to know about you. So it's not difficult.
Yeah. So thank you for helping us spread the word.
Okay, no problem. All right. Well, thanks a lot. And I'll let you go back to bed if you're going to do that, or go and get some breakfast or something. Thanks.
Oh, it'll
thanks
be
a lot.
now.